yesterday.
Ronald Reagan did not do this thing.
No, but Ronald Reagan took advantage of it yesterday and called Michael Dukakis an invalid.
He apologized for it, too.
Oh.
He certainly did.
So you've called up to tell us some of the great things that George Bush has done in his career.
Yes.
Well, go ahead.
All right. One thing, he has been very loyal to the presidency of the United States, which is more than you've done. You don't even...
I'm not running for president now.
Enough to call him sir. You call him idiots and everything else.
Well, when he does idiotic things, yes, I do. But I'm not running for president, ma'am. So what are some of the other great things that George Bush has done?
One thing about it, he won Congress. He ran for Congress in the state of Texas, and he won it, by God.
Yes, ma'am. He also ran for senator in the state of Texas and lost, by God. He also ran for senator in the state of Texas and lost, by God.
Democrats.
Pardon?
You had your Ralph Yarbrough, your great big liberal that no one wanted.
Ma'am, it was Lloyd Benson that beat him.
I know who. Lloyd Benson came and ran against George Bush. I am a native Texan. I moved down here just 3 years ago from Houston.
Great.
So I know a lot about the state of Texas, more than you would ever know.
Then you should also know about how Houston is suffering because of the Reagan administration.
Bush didn't do it and Reagan didn't do it. By God, it's
who did it, ma'am?
You liberals and people like you that got this place in such a mess.
Oh.
And all deal. Y'all are the ones.
Well, could you continue with his recitation of some of the great accomplishments of George Bush?
Well, one thing about it, he put the oil place back.
George Bush put the...
And look...
ma'am, what did George Bush... Ma'am, what did George Bush do to put the oil prices back?
He is not in a position to do it. But
well, then why did you say he did it?
He would, I say.
Why did you... Oh, he would.
He was a businessman.
Well, could you tell us what... Ma'am, could you tell us what he did do, not what he would do?
People in the state of Texas.
Ma'am, could you tell us what he did do, not what he would have done if he could have?
I'll tell you what he did when he was a businessman in the state of Texas. He gave a lot of people employment. He brought up money.
How many people did he employ, ma'am?
And I guarantee...
Ma'am, how many people did he employ?
Hundreds.
How many hundreds?
Look, you don't check all your numbers. I don't know. I haven't...
Oh, you don't know whether or not he employed anybody.
Do what?
You don't really know whether or not he employed anybody.
I certainly do know.
Oh.
I certainly do know that, but I can tell you this, Mike.
So in other words, anybody that employs people has done great things?
Lloyd Benson was a good businessman. He helped the state of Texas. But... I guarantee you, George Bush didn't try to sell himself for $1,000 for to have breakfast with him.
Well, who the hell would pay it? But could you continue with this great recitation of the marvelous accomplishments of George Bush's life, besides what he would have done if he could have, and the fact that he once employed someone?
His father was a great pioneer.
Well, ma'am, George Bush is not responsible. Ma'am, George Bush is not responsible for what his father did or didn't do. Could you tell us some of... Ma'am, could you tell us some of the great accomplishments that George Bush has accomplished in his life?
Man could not rise to where he has without his accomplishments.
Well, what are some of those accomplishments that has caused this great rise?
Being a good congressman.
Being a good congressman.
Director of the CIA, yes.
Well, what did he do as director of the CIA that you particularly liked?
So that idiots like you and draft judges...
Ma'am, what did he do as head of the CIA that you particularly liked?
He got it stronger than what it is right now. And what
he got it stronger than what it is right now?
No, Jimmy Carter.
Well, Jimmy Carter's not running, ma'am.
No, but he was.
Ma'am, George Bush was CIA director prior to Jimmy Carter, not afterwards. So could you tell us what George Bush did?
Jimmy Carter brought it down. Why don't you ever mention George Bush?
Ma'am, could you tell us exactly what it was that George Bush did as CIA director that you liked?
Well, I liked for him keeping confidential things and fighting for the United States.
Ma'am, how do you know that he fought for the United States if he kept it confidential? You also like Muscatel?
Huh?
Well, I thought so. Ann in Bradenton. Ann, you're on the air at 970 WFLA.
Hello, Bob.
Hello, Ann.
The best thing that George Bush done, when he was director for a year for a CIA, he didn't do a thing. So I think we should be grateful that he did. He was just there in...
Ann, have you been listening to the hour?
Yes, I have.
Well, then I'm really on a roll with some of these Bush supporters, so, sorry. John in Tampa. John, you're on the air, I suppose, to tell us about the great accomplishments of George Bush.
This Lassiter?
Yeah, it is.
Hey, Lassiter, I've been hearing the steam all morning, but, you're for leaving out some mainstream voters.
Great. What are some of George Bush's great accomplishments, John?
Well, I want to tell you,
Great. We're all breathlessly awaiting for you to tell us some of George Bush's great accomplishments.
Labor like some fat paychecks, and they'll make it.
What are some of George Bush's great accomplishments, John?
Do you remember deregulated airlines and the Teamsters all put out of business when the Carter and the Kennedy?
Well, John can't tell us about the great accomplishments of George Bush, even though that was clearly the directive today. Rick in Tampa, perchance you can tell us about George Bush's great accomplishments.
Yeah, I can. Bush didn't fall like a cheap camera the way Dukakis did to Jesse Jackson.
What are some of George Bush's great accomplishments?
I'm telling you, he's not a wimp. Dukakis is the wimp the way he falls.
Rick,
like
what are some of George Bush's great accomplishments?
These people will be sorry when they hit.
Do you know any great accomplishments that George Bush has ever done, Rick?
These people will be watering grass down here.
So you don't know of any great accomplishments of George Bush's?
When they hit with the new affirmative action, Bob.
Rick, you'll be lucky to have grass if George Bush is the president. Al in Clearwater. Al, you're on the air at 970 WFLA.
How you doing, Bob?
Great. What are some of George Bush's great accomplishments?
It's a great show you have. To begin with, right now, I think it's a great show.
What are some of George Bush's great accomplishments, Al?
I'm telling you, the truth is I really can't tell you, okay?
Okay, then we'll go to somebody who can. Angela in St. Petersburg. Angela, what are some of George Bush's great accomplishments?
Well, number one, he was a war hero. He was shot down in World War II.
Millions upon millions of men were war heroes in the Second World War.
Okay, he was director of the CIA. And
what did he do as director of the CIA that you liked?
What did he do? Well, I think...
Yes, that was a question. What did he do as director of the CIA that you liked?
Well, at least he held it together.
In other words, you don't know anything that he did as director of the CIA. You don't know whether he did things that you liked or you didn't like. All you know is that he was director of the CIA. Do you know under which president he served as director of the CIA?
I think it was under Ford.
You think it was under Ford?
Well, it was before Carter, so it was under Ford that he did it.
Well, there are other presidents before Carter, too.
Well, at least he was vice president of the United States. That's good. And at least he...
That's good.
Well, that is good. At least he fought...
Well, Walter Mondale was vice president of the United States. He also fought in the Second World War. Did you vote for him?
If I did vote, I would have voted for Mondale.
Uh-huh.
But, I mean, there's some good points as a vice president, George Bush.
So, in other words, you think that Mondale is better than Bush?
No, not really.
Well, you would have had an opportunity to choose between Mondale and Bush when Mondale was running, and you would have chosen Mondale.
I would have chosen Mondale, but Bush has good points, too.
Well, what are some of George Bush's great accomplishments, some of those good points?
Okay, I'll tell you, okay.
You said, okay, well...
As a good point he has, okay, even though Ronald Reagan had some bad policies, at least he stuck by him. He didn't go and deviate.
So, in other words, you like George Bush because he sticks to a man who has bad policies?
No, he sticks to the main guy. He sticks to the person he's working with. He's
well,
very
aside from
loyal.
supporting bad policies as a vice president, what else did George Bush do as vice president that you liked?
Well, at least he followed the president around. He didn't challenge the president.
Well, aside from following Ronald Reagan around, what else is it that George Bush did as vice president that you liked?
Well, okay. When Ronald Reagan stayed at home, he went abroad into Europe and did some of the...
Well, aside from traveling a lot, what else is it that George Bush did as vice president that you liked that qualifies him to be president?
Well, I think he took over the Republican convention, not the convention, but he...
It hasn't been held yet.
I know that, but I think he's the main guy in the Republican thing, and he's the strongest...
You think he's the main guy in the Republican thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's going to be... He might be the next president.
Mm-hmm. So, in other words, George Bush's greatest accomplishment is that he might be the next president.
He might be the next president,
and that's why we should vote for him, because he might be the next president.
He might be the next... And the Republicans are ruling everything.
Are you old enough to vote yet?
I will be in November.
Oh, my God. Joe in Tampa. Joe, you're on the air at 970 WFLA. What are some of George's great accomplishments?
His great I don't think this is based on his great accomplishments.
Yes, it is. I'm the one that sets the show, and that's what it's based on, George Bush's great accomplishments.
Based on, but if you look in history...
I read history frequently. What are some of George Bush's great accomplishments to this point in his year?
Trying to become president.
I beg your pardon. There are many things many people who have done great things in 60 years of life, whether or not they were running for president.
Give me examples.
Give you an example?
Yeah.
Picasso painted great paintings, and he never ran for president.
He didn't become president.
I know. I said there are many. Sir, I said there are many people who have done great things in their lives by the time they're 60 years old. No, whatever whatever. What are some of George Bush's great accomplishments that qualify him to be president?
No one has great accomplishments.
I beg your pardon, sir. Many people have many great accomplishments.
President?
George Bush is not a president, sir. What are some of George Bush's great accomplishments in 60 years of life?
John F. Kennedy's great accomplishments. None.
In other words, you don't know of any George Bush accomplishments.
George Bush ain't got none. And neither does
that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. Ken, in Clearwater, Ken, you're on the air. What are some of George's great accomplishments?
How you doing, Bob? I got just two things.
What are some of George's great accomplishments? Let's get right down to business here.
Okay, I got two things. I can't remember, and I wasn't there.
It's not the least bit amusing, Ken. We're talking to people who are Bush supporters. If you can't follow the rules, then you just don't get a chance to play the game. You understand what I mean? Let's go to John in St. Petersburg. Quickly, John, George Bush's great accomplishments.
Hi, Mr. Lassiter. I got about three of them. The first one is I think he's unexcelled in handsomeness.
Okay. People just don't follow the rules, so people who don't follow the rules don't get a chance to talk. Why do you guys do this to yourselves, huh? Waste your life in it. And I, sir, was not the hypocrite who wanted you to waste your life in it.
No,
and on top of that, sir, I don't believe I have ever really taken a stand on Dan Quayle's military service or lack thereof.
No, you
because
haven't.
it is irrelevant, sir. So why in the name of God did you start the conversation by saying that I had? Get off my phone, you jerk!